Israel surrounded the capital city, Beyrouth, surrounded it with tanks, allowed the entry of the phalangists, and did not allow terrified residents out of the camp. They blocked the exits. Israel claimed it was going to clear out PLO fighters, of which there were very few, if any. The IDF fired the flares that lit the sky that allowed the phalangists to find Palestinians and kill them. There was ongoing walkie-talkie communication between the militia and Israel. An Israeli bulldozer was digging the mass grave, and Israel also provided the lime and the body bags for the dead. And the soldiers at the forward command post could clearly see what was going on in the camps with binoculars. I'm Elън Zigel. I'm a Jewish American nurse, and I volunteered to go to Beyrouth in 1982 after Israel's invasion of Lebanon because I wanted to help the Palestinians, and Israel was not speaking in my name.
The immensity of the crime shocked the world. The refugee camps of Sabra and Šatila offered the softest of targets.
When I got to Beyrouth, I was shocked. It was one of the saddest scenes I had ever seen. There were young men laying around. I mean, there were beds on the streets because there were so many wounded. There were arms, legs missing from people. There were young men that were blinded from the shrapnel, from the bombings. It was a horrible, horrible scene. And the streets were lined with all this Israeli military equipment that had been used. It was very, very sad. Houses had been destroyed. People's lives completely horrible. The massacre at Sabra and Šatila in September 16th to the 18th, 1982, involves three countries. It involves the United States, Lebanon, and Israel. The president-elect of Lebanon, Bashir Gemayel, was assassinated on September 14th. Following his assassination, the Israelis came to Lebanon, came to Beyrouth, and surrounded the entire camp with tanks and soldiers. They would not let anybody out of the camp, and they would not let anybody in except the Phalange. The Phalange are a Lebanese Christian militia who are the sworn enemy of the Palestinians. And this goes back to the Tel Azatar massacre in the 1950s. And Israel decided that it wanted to get rid of any Palestinian fighters that were still in the camp. This is post-PLO evacuation from Beyrouth. And so they were going to go and destroy any PLO fighters, of which there were very few. And so they allowed the Phalange to go in to do their work. The Phalange came in and started to kill people. They started to massacre people, but in the most horrendous way, with axes and knives. Some of these pictures, some of these stories are just horrendous. The Israelis shot flares into the air. One of the other physicians and myself, we went to the top floor of the hospital during this time, and we saw flares going up in the air and lighting up neighborhoods of the camp, followed by gunfire. What was happening is that it lit the way for the Phalange to go door and kill people. This went on for like 2 days, and people started to flee towards the hospital, towards Gaza Hospital, looking for safety and security. The hospital got overwhelmed with people. The morgue got overcrowded. And wounds, people had wounds, they were running away, and so they were shot in the back of the arms, back of the legs. On September the 18th, the second day of the massacre, it got very quiet, and all the nurses and doctors were told to come to the entrance to the hospital. We came to the entrance to the hospital, and there were the Phalange, the Al-Quwat al-Lubnani on their uniform, crisp uniform. They took our passports, and they started to lead us out of the camp, the main street, Sabra Street. And we passed by dead bodies on the side of the street, passed by women and children being guarded by the militia. And this militia had walkie-talkies. They were in constant communication with somebody, and I imagine it was with the Israelis. As we got towards the end of the camp, they put us up against a bullet-ridden wall, and they were about to shoot us. What happened was an Israeli stopped it from the Israeli command post, saw what the Phalange were doing, and said, we can't be killing white people, all these Norwegians and Swedish and Americans. And so they stopped that execution. Then we were led down some more, and there was a bulldozer with the Hebrew letter Aleph on it. I studied Hebrew as a child, and this bulldozer was moving the earth back and forth, back and forth. This is where homes once stood. And what they were doing is they were burying bodies. They let us out of the camp, and they turned us over to the forward command post. The forward command post was up on a hill. It was on an apartment building, and they were on the roof, and they were looking down on the camp with binoculars. And we could see into the camp without binoculars. And then they drove us, that's the end of that, they drove us out of the camp. But they were clearly in charge of what was going on. Now, Israel recently claimed, past couple months, that it has lost the archives on the communication between the Israelis, the Lebanese, and the Phalangists. I don't think they lost the archives. Now, Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi war criminal, he did not drop the poison canisters into the gas chambers. Ariel Sharon did not stick a knife or an axe into a Palestinian body, but he allowed the massacre to continue. He gave permission and allowed it to happen. Adolf Eichmann provided the transport of Jews, the rounding up of Jews. I don't see a big difference between either one of them. They're both war criminals. They both committed crimes against humanity. In August, Philip Habib, who was the U.S. Special Envoy, made an agreement with the PLO, Lebanon, and Israel that once the PLO would evacuate Beyrut, which it did, there would be protection for the refugees left behind. It was called the Habib Agreement, and that Israel would not invade or occupy Beyrut. There was a guarantee of protection by sending in a multinational peacekeeping force, of which U.S. troops were part of. They arrived on August 21st. They were scheduled to remain 30 days and were supposed to stay inside of the Palestinian camps as long as necessary to assure the Palestinian civilians would be safe. They left on September 10th. The massacre started September 16th. So, they did not protect, and no action was taken to prevent a massacre. The U.S. needs to be accountable. It has some responsibility in this terrible event. And Lebanon just granted immunity to all the killers. So no justice. Palestinians are the most resilient people I've ever met. And they remain steadfast. And it's heartbreaking. You see these women, and they've aged, their lines, they're in their 70s, their 80s. And the last thing they remember is they saw their husband and their kids 40 years ago who were young and vibrant and gone.